go whatever speed they decided to. You could go the speed limit and you'd be okay. You could go 90 and be okay. Well, maybe not, but you at least wouldn't hit anyone. And everything in between, but everybody could just do what they saw was best. There was room for everyone. And I remember that experience very well. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 7. We're only going to look at 2 verses tonight, and this is one of them. Matthew chapter 7, in verses 13 and 14. Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Some of you probably have this memorized. This is what it says. Enter in by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter in by it. How narrow is the gate, and the way is restricted that leads to life. There are few who find it. If I could boil down the idea of a wide road to as simple as I know how, it would simply be a road with extra options. Think about it. 1 lane compared to 8 lanes. On the 1 lane, you're stuck behind the truck for 3 hours. On the wide road, they almost don't exist. You can simply go around, you have extra maneuverability, you have extra choices. Narrow road is just fewer choices. What I find interesting about this verse is that it is counterintuitive. It's a fancy word meaning we don't normally think that way because wide roads are good. I mean, if you think about it, cities spend millions of dollars to make wide roads just for the purpose I told you about, to give people flexibility and freedom. And to be honest, God is a firm believer in giving people more options and more opportunities. For example, the angels. Angels fly, move through space where there's like nothing there. They can turn invisible, pass through walls, shine very brightly, move at ridiculous speeds, and even shape change. How many of you can do that? Exactly. You know, it's significant to me that the beings that serve God closest to the throne are those with the most flexibility and power. Why are you here? To give yourselves more options in how to go through life. Having a high school diploma opens up options that you would not have otherwise unless you happen to be very skilled at some trade. Having a college diploma and that college training makes you even more capable. And it says something that God has given many instructions about actually making schools to give you more options. Wide roads are not necessarily bad. In fact, we are hardwired to take them and to try and expand our opportunities. It is natural. That's why I say this verse is counterintuitive, because it goes against what we are naturally inclined to think. So then, what's the problem? Turn with me to the second text, and that is Proverbs chapter 4, verse 19. I told you there's going to be 2 texts, and this is the second one. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 19. This particular verse talks about a road, or a way, as in my translation. And this is what it says. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They don't know what they stumble over. In the darkness, the Lego block is the enemy of mankind. How many of you have ever stepped on a small toy when you couldn't see it? Then you know what I'm talking about. If you know, it's bad enough to have an obstacle in your path, but it's like 3 times worse when you never saw it coming. You miss a stair and you fall over headlong. You step on these little like jacks with, pointy things on them. You run into furniture, and you had no idea it was there. When you go to somebody's house and you're stumbling around in the dark, you don't know where anything is, and it hits something. It's difficult to wander in the dark because you don't know what's there. And that's what this verse is saying. The way of the wicked is like a dark house with lots of obstacles. What does this look like in real life? Well, one of my interests, I'm a science teacher, so maybe go figure on this one, is storm chasing. Now, I've never chased any storms, and I don't plan to. God has better things for me to do in my life. But there are people who do it, and there are people that have done a lot of research, and their research has helped improve tornado warning systems, as well as storm forecasting in general. So I don't want to criticize them. Now, storm chasing is one of those things, it's kind of like firefighting. If you have no idea what you're doing and you go to fight a fire, you're a fool. But if somebody is well trained in how fire works, techniques to fight it, situations to enter, no-go situations, if they have a deep and intricate understanding of how the fire actually works and how best to fight it, you can do pretty well. And that's why there's thousands of firefighters that don't lose their lives. They understand. Storm chasing is similar. Tornadoes follow very regular patterns of how they typically form, how long they last, directions they travel, width, everything. And so there's lots of storm chasers that do just fine, and if it tells you anything, in 40 years of storm chasing, there have only been 4 storm chaser deaths. That's a death every decade. Pretty incredible. So I want to tell you a story about a tornado, and it happened near Oklahoma City. This was 8 years ago. Now, this tornado was unusual for a number of reasons. One of them was that it was a large tornado. It eventually grew to be 2.5 miles wide. Just to give you some visual concept, do you all know where the Irizarry's house is? That is a mile from campus. The tornado could swallow campus and swallow the Irizarry's house, and if you know where Mr. Glass's house is, could also swallow his house all at the same time. Massive. It's halfway to Amity, if that gives you any idea. The second thing was that its speed was very irregular. It started off just kind of like turning in a circle, and people were taking photographs of it and whatever, and then it suddenly accelerated to around 60 miles an hour. Now, this is 2.5 miles wide, so not good. The third thing that was a little awkward about this tornado is that it went the wrong direction. Because of how storms rotate, at least I think that's the reason, tornadoes tend to track northeast. And if you look at storm tracks during major tornado outbreaks, you'll see all these northeastern lines of tornadoes. It's a pretty regular thing. Not this one. This one went southeast, which caught a lot of people off guard because a storm chaser's first instinct is run south because they go north. But they ended up running right into the path of tornado, so I'll get there. But the fourth thing that made this tornado, and this isn't necessarily irregular, but it made it more difficult, is that it's something called rain-wrapped. You see, around the tornado itself is a circulating mass of air that is largely invisible. But what often happens with supercells is, well, they rain. And so what happens is that the rain gets sucked into that invisible circulating air around the tornado, and it basically wraps the tornado like an invisibility cloak. All you see is this wall of moving rain that's kind of going side to side, but no tornado. And in fact, they call it the bear's cage, because the cage is the rain and the tornado inside is the bear. If that gives you an idea of how little you want to go inside of there. So this was a highly unusual tornado, and it really gave a lot of storm chasers a good scare, especially when it plowed into a whole bunch of them. Nobody was killed. One guy did break his neck, but he was okay. Not a big deal. But thankfully, modern medicine has helped us. But there was one storm researcher by the name of Tim. Now, Tim was not your average storm chaser. He had been doing it for well over a decade. His big thing was dropping probes onto the ground in the hopes that the tornado would run over it, and then he could take measurements of the inside of the tornado. And he invented these probes himself. He never went to college. He was just a really great engineer, science guy, so he just did it for fun. And he co-authored, I think, a dozen meteorological papers having to do with tornadoes. Not your average guy. Now, Tim, when all of this started, was north of this large tornado. And he stayed north because he thought he could get a better view. He had 2 other people in the car with him, his son and another friend of theirs. And so he saw it going south, and so Tim follows it south, and then the tornado starts to track just dead east. And so he, of course, runs parallel with it. He gets a little too close and is like, uh-oh, better go north. So he tracks 2 miles north. This is on the farm grid, by the way, open terrain, lots of, roads like this. And then after going north 2 miles just to put some space, they go east again. And so they're paralleling this tornado, and there's a discussion in the car about, well, what should our next move be? Because they want to get in front of this thing to drop the science probes. And so they come to this intersection, and they have a decision to make. They could either continue heading east, parallel to the tornado, they could go north, get some more breathing room, or they could go the opposite direction, do a 180, go west, and call the chase off. And they discussed their options, and they weren't entirely sure where the tornado was because, again, the thing is rain-wrapped. You couldn't really see the whole thing. So it's like, we're not sure. They make a decision to continue paralleling the tornado to the east. It turned out to be a bad decision. Let me tell you why. The first thing is that they were on farm roads. How many of you have ever been on a farm road? Gravel. You don't get good traction on gravel. If you need to go at high speeds, it's a little more difficult than a paved road. The second reason is the road that they chose ended in a T about 4 miles from their position. So if they weren't able, if something happened and they had to turn, they couldn't just continue. They'd actually have to slow down and go north or south. But those 2 were factors, but that wasn't the major reason. The major reason is that they were not actually paralleling the tornado. They thought they were. The tornado was actually going northeast. In other words, when they went east, they were not going on a parallel course, they were going on an intercept course. In other words, they were driving into the tornado. Now, they didn't know that because when they looked ahead dead east, they see sunlight and cheerful things, and off to the south was, this whirling mass of rain. And so they thought, well, it looks clear, and we're parallel, right? Let's just go for it. But they weren't parallel. They weren't thinking ahead, and the tornado was actually going like this. The last recorded living words of the head researcher, Tim, as they pass the intersection and they see the tornado hooking to the north towards them was, "I think we're in a bad spot." The next day, they found the crushed remnants of the car. No one survived. I hope you realize that the reason this terrible thing happened was literally because they chose the wrong road. Now, this guy was highly experienced as a chaser. He had chased over 100 tornadoes. He dropped probes in front of them. That's risky business. He knew what he was doing. It's not like the dangers were unknown to him. It's that he wanted it so much that he ignored all of the warning signs. He did not actually know the tornado's position. They were guessing at it. It was a rain wall. He knew that tornadoes typically go to the north and that they do change directions. And he was also in a very underpowered car on a gravel road, loaded down with science instruments and 2 other people. And so when he entered the wind field of the tornado, his car went nowhere. It basically ground him to a halt until the main funnel came along. Okay, you're probably thinking, dude, this is a tornado. I'm not going to go chasing 2.5-mile tornadoes. That's just dumb. The thing is that we do very similar things on a daily basis, perhaps. it is very easy for us to misunderstand a situation because we want something bad enough. For example, I read a story about a lady who had taken on some student loans, and she was describing the process. And the process included a crying father, because her father saw that she was going to take on all these, heavy student debts to go get her college degree, and he's saying, you don't understand what you're getting yourself into. This is going to take a long time to pay off. The interest rates are going to hurt you. And so there was plenty of information on the table in front of her, but she really wanted the degree. And so she's like, nope, don't care. Let's do the student loans. 15 years later, she's still paying them off. And the reason why I know about this is because she wrote a fairly angry article about her being so upset at taking these student loans on. Again, the information was there, but she wanted something so badly, totally ignored the warning signs. It's super common. Now, there was a lot of chasers there, but there was one in particular named Skip. Now, what was interesting about Skip is that relative to the tornado, he was in a worse position. He was directly in front of it. Because as it swung down, he was here, and they're outside the car taking photographs, shooting video, and it's like, wait a minute, this thing is coming really, really fast. Again, 60 miles an hour. Now, Skip, whenever he storm chases, he has two rules that he follows no matter what the situation is. The first one is, if you're going to run from a tornado, you use either a major road or a road that you have already been down. You know the conditions of it, and you have enough traction to actually, get you out of there. The second thing is, if you're ever in doubt about where the tornado is or anything, don't ask questions, just run. And that's exactly what he did. When they saw the tornado coming towards them, they hopped in the minivan that they had, raced east, and once they felt like they had enough ground, they turned south. And that's about when the tornado hooked north, and they were just fine. They got out of the van and they kept shooting video. It's really, really easy for us to become confused and blinded by our own desires. And that is what usually leads people down, say, the wide road, the road of extra options. We see something that we want, and we don't think we can get it by taking the narrow road, and so it's like, well, let's do it this way, some way which is full of risk, and we don't properly understand. The easiest way out of that is to decide beforehand, I'm going to restrict my options. There are simply some roads that should never be taken in life, and when offered the opportunity to take those roads, just don't do it. And it's good to decide that before you get in the situation, because when the emotions are going and you really want something, it's a lot harder to make those kinds of decisions. A setting like this is a good place to make those decisions calmly, carefully, just say, this way is not safe. There was, I don't know how many years ago this was, probably 20 or so. There was in an Adventist conference, there was a literature evangelism director, I believe. And so he was in charge of, the different people under him. And with this particular person, there came a person offering to make videos, excuse me, for a particular series of books that they had. Now, to this director, this sounded like a really great idea because, videos, who doesn't like video? Personally, I love using the DVDs when I'm canvassing, especially for people that don't like books. We once had a person give a $1,000 check, and it's like, no, I don't want any books. It's like, here, take this DVD. It's like, yeah, okay. And so, man, most expensive DVD I've ever seen sold. So, but it was something, So I'm not against using video. Don't take it this way. So people loved the idea, and so the different canvassing leaders and canvassers under this particular director started taking pre-orders for the series that this man was developing. Now, there was a literature evangelism leader that when he looked at the situation, In his eyes, it looked like the videos that they wanted to produce did not line up with the counsel that we have about the types of books to distribute. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go read Colporteur Ministry. And he felt uneasy about this. It didn't seem to line up, and so he made a decision. You know what? I'm not going to take any pre-orders for this. I'm just going to use the books that I've been using and have already been successful with. And so that's how it went. The other canvassing directors and people were taking pre-orders for this video series. Him, nothing. Wouldn't even show it, wouldn't take anything for it. Now, over time, there began to be some problems. Oh, thank you so much. As water to the thirsty. Over time, the videos got delayed, and it was kind of stressing people out because they had promised a delivery date for, getting these videos to the people that pre-ordered them. And, people are giving angry phone calls. Administrators know all about this when something's not on time. And eventually, the canvassing director of that area gets in contact with this person. It's like, what is going on? Why aren't these here? It's like, I'm sorry, there's been a legal holdup with this. The lawyers, I got some lawyers working on this. We just need to pay the lawyer fees, get this going. And it's like, well, how much are the lawyer fees? Like $100,000. And didn't even think twice about it. It's like, okay, goes to the bank, gets the $100,000 from whatever conference account they had, wires the money, and the guy disappears. There never was a video series. It was a scammer. A scammer that targets high-level people, feeds them something that they want, and then when the pressure is on, when they're controlled by their emotions and not by principle, takes advantage of them. Very common. The canvassing leader that never sold any of the pre-orders, no problem. He never bought into it to begin with. And so when the bottom fell out, when it turned out this was a dark, wide road, he was okay. Why was he okay? Because he made a decision beforehand to follow God's principles and not to stray from it. Just to summarize, I don't want you to get the idea that God has us on a super restricted road. Honestly, God really wants to empower you to the most that you can possibly handle. But that doesn't mean that every road is safe. Some roads are dangerous. And it's not like the dangers are invisible. They're well known. Lots of people throughout history have committed the same mistakes over and over. Our parents have committed the same mistakes over and over. Us teachers have committed the same mistakes over and over. It's not like there's a lack of information. But when you really want something, it's very difficult to think clearly in those situations. You have to make a decision beforehand. I'm not going to go down that road. At this time, you may gather together in groups and pray with each other. And at the end, we'll sing. Pairs. Thank you.